What's up, guys? It's your boy Omar, and today I'm back with another banger. Today I'm going to be talking about just a series of executive orders coming out. We keep hearing this term, executive order ending the world or U.S. United States partnership with the World Health Organization. Executive order only creating two genders. But what does that mean? And I think a lot of people don't understand. In addition to that, I think a lot of people over the last few presidential administrations, there's been so many executive orders issued that people are seeing this as a norm, right? And even more so today, it seems like it's a race to see who can issue the most executive orders. Because in reality, your president is of preference, whether it was Biden, Obama, or Trump, first or second term. The truth is, they could be issuing executive orders and they may not mean shit at all. Excuse my language for the kids. But we're going to go ahead and dive into it. So, this, and I'll be fully transparent, this is from the ACLU's, the American Civil Liberties. Actually, I'm going to go back and look it up, what ACLU stands for. But pretty much it's a left leaning, or it's been identified as like left leaning advocacy group. But to me, this is a pretty straightforward definition of what is an executive order and how it's different from the law. So Article 2 of the Constitution vests the president with executive power over the government, including the obligation to take care that laws be faithfully executed. An executive order is a written directive signed by the president that orders the government to take specific actions to ensure the laws be faithfully executed. It might mean telling the Department of Education to implement a certain rule or declaring a new policy priority. Executive orders, however, cannot override federal laws and statutes. And like I said, pretty straightforward, clear, concise. In short, if I were to translate this at like very low level, it's a way for a president or executive authority, in this case the president, to come in and implement, I guess, low-hanging fruit policy, right? So as the president of the federal government or the executive authority of the federal government, pretty much he has the ability to come in, change priorities. So over the last 3 weeks, we've been hearing DEI this, DEI that, railing against any diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives, citing this as the decline and some of the bad decisions being made in our government. And in all honesty, that's not the case, right? It's a series of just bad decisions made by both parties, right? Both parties are a big part of the increased debt ceiling, the country's $1 trillion debt that just continues to bloom. In actuality, are there areas that could be trimmed? Efforts to encourage government efficiency and improve financial practices of the U.S.? Absolutely. Just as any other organization, private, nonprofit, public, the federal government is no different, right? And I'm sure there are plenty of areas of waste. As a matter of fact, I know because there are many of GAO, Government Accountability Office reports that have been published highlighting that. But waging a crusade with your focal point being DEI as your policy priority is just kind of misleading, right? Donald Trump has been given the vested power by the Constitution to do so, right? So along with that, many of the directives, and I'll show you this in a bit. I have a spreadsheet with 80 that highlights. There's about 80 plus directives that have been executed by the Trump administration. Some of these are being challenged in court, and I'll get to that in a minute because back to your president may be signing executive orders, but they may not mean anything, right? If they don't meet the legal litmus test, meaning if there's some group who finds an aspect of whatever this policy been executed by executive order unconstitutional, they can challenge it in a court of law. Usually it's some of these regional circuit courts, so Court of Appeals, well, I think it goes circuit court, Court of Appeals, and then possibly up to, or yeah, if it can't get decided at that level, then it would go up to the Supreme Court. But yes, possibly up to the Supreme Court. But just to continue along with this, statutes have to be passed by Congress and signed by the president, or vetoed. The Congress must override the veto for the bill to become law. Executive orders can't preempt this process, and that's an important piece. Furthermore, the Constitution gives Congress control over things like taxation, spending, and certain war powers. Most things we think of when we think of laws come from the Congress. What counts as a criminal offense? How much the federal government can tax our income, and declaring war or making treaties. Okay, statutes have to be passed by Congress and signed by the president. I'll break this down piece by piece. So statutes have to be passed by Congress and signed by the president in order to become a law, right? Just highlighting that separation of powers and that you need separation of powers, right? That check and balance between each branch of government to ensure that we never become subjected to tyranny or fall back into a tyrannical monarch, autocratic style of government, right? It's not unilateral. Decisions aren't being executed unilaterally. You have the House or the Congress, which is made up of the House and the Representatives and the Senators, who are sent there by the people who elected them to handle business. And the executive order somewhat, in some cases, is able to bypass that, but not always. Let's say a good example is the infrastructure bill. There are aspects that of the infrastructure bill the Trump administration could execute an executive order to disrupt, right? Just completely hinder the execution of it. And then that way later down the line, they can say, look, this bill was a disaster. But in actuality, they probably hollowed out some of the incentives that were being given to, let's say, one of the big initiatives was EV infrastructure, setting up charging stations in places like West Texas. So whenever you're traveling, there's not charging stations too far and wide in between, right? That just sets us up for long-term sustainable EV supportive infrastructure. But again, like I said, Trump administration could say, we're not going to offer any credits or anything from the federal government's end to support this initiative. So it's going to hinder that, because a full-on executive order to stop that bill would be impossible. Yes, the Republicans have control of the House and the Senate, also a right-leaning Supreme Court. But at the same time, that bipartisan infrastructure bill was signed into law by Congress, and it is law. So any executive order issued to attempt to completely stop it would be challenged in court. So let me know if I'm not being clear. So that and executive orders can't preempt this process. So I just want to go to a list of all the executive orders. Or actually, let's start here. So this just highlights over the years how many executive orders have been issued by each president. And like, my gosh, when you really take a look at this list, George Washington, 8, right? 8 total orders. And it has their average length of years. This guy didn't last very long. Let's see, who else is on here? Abe Lincoln. Interestingly, in the era that he served, the Civil War, only 48 executive orders issued, whereas post-Civil War, you have this Reconstruction period, which you have Ulysses S. Grant, and that's when you start to see this sharp spike in issuance of executive orders. Let's see, James A. Garfield. I actually did a report on this guy. He was James A. Garfield. He was the 20th president. Did a report on this guy in like 1st or 2nd grade, and it was short because, as you can see, his tenure didn't last too long. Then you get to what do they call it? This New Deal era, right? Coming out of the Depression, and so you see Woodrow Wilson. Well, not quite there yet, right? Woodrow Wilson, the father of modern public administration, who kind of posed this dichotomy of public administration versus politics, and what is the role of an administrator in the political thicket, right? Which is actually very relevant. I'm glad I brought this up. It's very timely relevant because Trump recently enacted an executive order to make all of our GS employees, so our government employees, civil service employees, Schedule F employees, which would make them, in short, like would become political appointees. So he has more leeway, more ability to easily dismiss them, fire them, right? And this is interesting because our current civil service is structured in a way so you have the executive authority, and then that person brings their cabinet members with them. So this is your Secretary of Education, Department of Transportation, HUD, EPA. These are all typically political appointees, which the president has the authorization to do that. In addition, there are some branches, or not branches, but there are some departments in which the executive administration is allowed to install political appointees. Let's say GAO is an example. The Comptroller General is selected every 15 years. And in all honesty, there are some agencies in which that makes sense, because if you have this constant political turnover and this shift in ideology, it's nothing is going to get accomplished, in short. Yeah, I remember a GAO report I read a while back basically said nothing was getting accomplished in one of our nuclear regulatory agencies because of the constant political shift and the difference, the varying ideologies on how particular issues should be addressed. But yes, yeah, our public administration. And so it's all been challenged today, and Trump is trying to install more political appointees. That's the point that I'm making. And which in turn is going to be disastrous, right? Because now you're going to have a bunch of, and nobody in this world is apolitical. He has their opinion, right? And people that I've had the privilege of working with in government administration have been able to put their personal views on a situation aside for the sake of the people that they serve, or whoever the target group is of the agency that they serve, right? And now you're going to get these people who are loyalists. I may not agree with everything that this person at the top says, but I'm beholden to the party. I have to support my party, whatever the agenda is. I may not agree with the most egregious aspects of it, but because I want this one thing to happen, I'm going to stay true to the party. And ironically, it's very 1984-ish. Carry on. Let's see. All right. So yes, now, like I said, you get into the New Deal era in which there's this dramatic transformation of government. Now, it is worth noting, let's see, if you look at the last two presidents to follow, they're averaging about 1,000 executive orders per term. Calvin Coolidge was trending that way, and then his presidency cut short. Harry Truman, less executive orders. So fast forward to now, boom, in recent decades, right? So you have George Bush, Clinton, Bush, Barack Obama, both terms, and then Donald Trump and Joseph R. Biden. And really, a lot of these executive orders are counteracting what the previous administrations, some of the initiatives enacted by previous administrations, right? So that counts as an executive order. But also, too, it's a method of bypassing. When right now we're in an age or a day and age where there's a ton of gridlock. Congress can't get anything done. It was a fight tooth and nail to get that infrastructure bill done. And both parties just have a hard time coming together, right? It's can't only serve the Republican people of the United States. You can't only serve the Democrat people of the United States. You got to be the president of the United States. And the fact of the matter is, we're not all going to see eye to eye on policy, but for some reason, we're letting the loudest and the most egregious mouths hijack the media sphere and just hijack this moment. And that's what you want to call it. That's how I feel about it. Now, I'm going to go over to this second. this is what I really want to highlight. Actually, so I had a colleague on LinkedIn and they shared a document. It looks like it's an advocacy firm who they put together a spreadsheet in which they're tracking all of these issues. A very well organized spreadsheet. There's no misinformation. It's all those links there direct straight to the White House's website. So there's no way you can get your wires crossed. It's not Fox News or some another idiot on YouTube spewing misinformation. All this stuff is coming straight from the dragon's mouth. But in all this talk of the executive orders, people are starting to lose how many that have been issued. So this is actually a pretty nifty tool. Let's see, actually. So it says here 68 have been have issued, and it says last updated February 14th. But who knows? Today's the 15th. So as of this recording, today's February 15th, and more have probably been executed. So I'll start from the top. Well, I'll go down to the bottom just so you can see how many are here. I think from time to time I'll just probably spotlight some of the most egregious ones. And it looks like, as an additional added, they have, executive order trackers from sources. So New York Times, Politico, Washington Post, which people will say those are left-leaning organizations. Post is questionable. New York Times, I will admit, is a very left-leaning. As far as that, sometimes news is just news, right? And sometimes you don't always like the news that's reported, and it is what it is. But in Politico, I don't really entertain Politico too much, but carry on. So, yeah, I'll click on this one because we're against DEI right now, or actually, better yet, the hiring freeze. So this is an executive order. It's signed the day of inauguration. That big stunt in which the stadium, which I'll agree that was very, 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 very genius. There's not many do actually like about President Trump, just because of a lot of character issues. And I mean, I'll leave it at that. But I agree that he's not the most skilled. He's an effective media marketing guy. That's it. He just how to make the moment last. And that is something that will truly stick with all of those people who attended the inauguration that day. The president signing executive orders, and 3/4 of those people may know that a good chunk of those executive orders that he signed may not even stick. But it doesn't matter. It's just the symbolism, the vision of seeing a president in action. And so it's a good move for the media. Yeah. But yes. So the executive order directs a hiring freeze for all federal employees to be applied throughout the executive branch. No vacancies may be filled or new positions created until the freeze is lifted. This freeze does not apply to military personnel because we still need people to be recruited. That's why. Positions related to immigrant enforcement, national security, or public safety. So federal law enforcement, national security, so NSA, spies, all those folks, and anything that may adversely impact the provision of Social Security, Medicare, and veterans benefits. So until we figure out what you guys actually do, continue administering benefits as regularly scheduled. And then once a little bit of time in the agency, the Doge folks, they may consider what happens to those people. That's the way I interpret it. So it lets you know how long, the length in which the president expects some type of action on this. So a 90-day period. This hiring freeze is good for a 90-day period. And then following post 90-day period, you got to understand, in conjunction with the hiring freeze, there's also currently the buyout initiative, which last time that I checked, I think 65,000 employees had the offer. The rest, yeah, I think so. The 10th was, and the extension, the deadline was extended, and during about 30,000 more people opted in. I think, I think it's past check and follow up with that. But from what I understand, as of current, the administration has moved to firing all those probationary period folks, which In the federal government, depending on the role that you're in, turn that sound off. In the federal government, depending on the role that you're in, the probationary period can be up to 2 years, which there's debate among people as to whether if that's too generous. But it's actually, I mean, when you really think about it, have somebody new come on board, it takes a little bit to get in the groove of things and get them to understand how the institution works, right? And the agency that I worked for, they were really good about training you up, giving you the tools to be successful. But then at the same time, it did give room for like process improvement. How can we streamline or make certain processes better? And I wish more organizations would do it, especially in the private sector. But the problem with the private sector is they're so subjected to the ebbs and flows of the economy that, giving you 2 years to get in the flow, it's not ideal for them, because they may give you a little bit of time, but then they expect you to run and keep running and help the organization become a true the organization. And I'm not saying that that's not the case with the federal government, but I think with the federal government, there's more incentive to train your employees up over time and get them to understand these institutions, because one, they've been around for so long, the institutions, but then two, public service has a recruiting problem, like at all levels of government, because the fact of the matter is you have to have a certain type of person. Right now, I'm truly upset and distraught that the perception of public servants is that they're lazy and they're getting all these benefits on the taxpayer's dime and they're not doing anything, and that's not the case. That is that these same people also will want government as a business, which to an extent is true. There are many similarities, especially when you think about organizational management, many similarities between the two. But the thing is, if and hopefully the administration realizes this soon. I don't think they will. But in doing this, you're losing actually some of your most talented people. There are people at the agency that I worked for who had been there for 20, 30 years, like clearly past retirement, but they had a wealth of expertise that if they took the bait and left, like I know that particular agency, they're going to get some new people in there, bring them up to speed, whatever, but it's going to take them a while. And what I mean is like 30 years of experience. They probably went to the military, they got a secondary degree from the War College. They're probably going to go work for one of these private sector defense companies or something and make more bank unless the president opts to discriminate against federal employees who are now employed by private sector counterparts. And we'll see how that plays out. But I just have I really just wanted to share this with you, and I'm probably going to pull this up more often, just because I anticipate more executive orders coming out in the days ahead. Keep in mind here, and I'm going to go back to this page. Keep in mind, this says he's at 68 executive orders. President Biden, by the end of his 4-year term, 162 executive orders. Trump, by the end of his first term, 220 executive orders. This man is on pace. Like, keep in mind, it hasn't even been a full 30 days. It hasn't been a full 30 days of his presidency. So somebody do the math on that. Sure, I could ask ChatGPT. Maybe next time I tune in, I'll have an answer for you. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. If you see more videos like these, I didn't really do an in-depth analysis. Actually, I never pulled up that executive order. Here we go. I just don't want to give the perception that I'm giving misleading information. So, as I said, this is directly to the White House's website, and whatever intern typed up a summary of this explaining, like, yes, this memory does not limit the nomination to presidential positions, Schedule A or C, in the accepted service, the appointment of officials through temporary organization and hiring authority pursuant to blah, blah, blah. Basically saying that everybody who is not in a position to be appointed by the president or one of his high-ranking level cabinet members, is subject to a hiring freeze. So let me know what your thoughts are about this. If you'd like to see more videos like these, definitely hit me up and make sure you hit the follow button. Thank you for your time.